Hey everyone, Azo here and welcome to the third part of my video series on the French. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2, feel free to check them out in the video description. Here in part 3, I'll be discussing a very critical, underappreciated aspect of playing the French defense as black, queenside attacks. There are times where you have your familiar pawn structure, but for whatever reason, it's too risky to play f6. When that happens, it means that this pawn structure is here to stay, and we have to center our plans around it. In this case, because our pawn chain is pointed towards the queen side, we have more space there and that's where we should attack. White, on the other hand, generally speaking, will have the pawns pointed towards the king side and should be looking for activity on that wing. But this often raises some concern among players, especially those at the club level. Because after both sides eventually castle short, it appears that White will simply have a good time attacking our king, whereas we'll be shooting into an empty space. But this is simply not true. So I'm going to give you some inspiration on how to generate a queenside attack by showing two games where black was successful in this opposite side attacking race. But before that, I have to, as always, emphasize that the games I have selected here are played by humans and won't be perfect. But what matters is that they demonstrate a good understanding of the position's objectives and we can learn from their play. But anyway, without further ado, let's look at a game between two strong Dutch players, Hopman Peter playing white and Visser H playing black. We have a Teresh, which quickly arrives at the usual structure. So black went with the c5 pawn break, and white went with f4 and knight d to f3. The idea is to develop the bishop to d3, the other knight to e2, and then short castle. And here comes the first exciting point of the game. You can pause the video and try to anticipate black's move if you like. The move played here was a5. With strong faith in the queenside attack, H unabashedly goes for the very direct plan of a5, a4 and a3. And the strong point of this plan is that white is going to get a queenside weakness one way or another. If white plays a3 to stop black from playing a3, then b3 and b2 are weakened. Otherwise, if black does get an a3, which happened in the game, b4 and a2 become very weak. And of course, black took advantage of that immediately with knight b4. And it should be noted that black can get away with what appears to be violations of opening principles because 1. The position is very closed, so any lead in development or lack thereof will be muted. And 2. White hasn't been the most efficient with his time either, spending time on moves that don't directly help with piece development. But back to the game. Since white has placed all of his pawns on dark squares, the value of the dark square bishop has dropped tremendously, while the light square bishop is worth significantly more than at the start of the game. So to retain any chances of an attack, Peter had to preserve his bishop with bishop b1, which conveniently guards a2 but traps the rook. Both sides continue with their development. And now a nice move by H, g6, to prevent any chances of counterplay with an f5 pawn break. The game continued. Rook to c8 and then knight to d1, attacking the good b4 knight. And this forced black to trade one advantage for another. He had to go knight c2, so he lost the good knight, but now he has managed to win the battle of white's two bishops. Now white got to kick the rook with knight to e3, but now, with the knight no longer on c3, the b5 square is available for black's bad bishop to activate. Furthermore, with f5 under control, the bishop is no longer needed on d7. Going ahead a few more moves, white managed to win the a pawn. The problem is that black can gain a decisive advantage by breaking this spin on the knight and then going knight c4 so that this trapped bishop can't trade itself away. But H instead chose to power up on the a file, and Peter immediately broke this spin so that he could trade the bishop away for the knight. But now there's another problem, and that is the a pawn. After rook a6, it's tough to suggest a move for white to defend it. Queen c1 was played, and now here you can pause the video and try to find the move for black if you like. It's bishop takes b4. The point is it can't be taken because of the rook a1 pin. So Peter decided to throw caution to the wind and went f5, ignoring this rook, which can actually be taken because it may appear that black's king position is a little bit suspect, but black will have rook a1 in the next move to force one of white's pieces back and white will be too passive to generate an attack. But anyway, in the game, black played rook takes a3, and white tried a little trick here, knight c2. And his idea is to go queen h6 followed by f6 or knight g5. So here, if you're black, what would you play? Pause the video to find the move. So rook takes c3 can actually be played, but you need to find the correct defense. After queen h6, you need to stop f6 with e takes f5. And the reason is that knight g5 is not a problem because of queen a1 and white's back rank issues will show. So white had to create a flight square for the king, but this gives black time to get rid of the problem, and white resigned after a few moves. So this was one good example of how to execute a queenside attack. You first expand, and then you prevent counterplay on the opposite side with moves like g6, and eventually fierce dominance on the queen side can often help solve problems on the king side. Keep white busy all along, and you can find defensive resources thanks to the activity of your queenside pieces. Now I'd like to share one more example in a pretty important variation we've yet to discuss, the King's Indian attack. I'll show you why it is and how to combat it with the next game from the 2000 Istanbul Chess Olympiad. So let's begin. e4, and instead of the usual d4, d3 to reinforce the e4 and c4 squares. After which you can expect white to play the following moves in some order. Queen e2, threatening e takes d5, and black can't take back with the pawn because of the pin. So black closed the file, and white went with knight f3, g3, bishop g2, and castle. And skipping ahead to move 11. This is how you can expect most King's Indian players to develop. The idea is that they want to go for a kingside attack with moves like knight f1, h4, knight h2, knight g4, h5, h6. And if black tries to stop h6 with h6 himself, then there are some possibilities for piece sacrifice. And even though the pawn structure is a little bit different from that of a typical French game, both sides should still attack their usual flank. White to the king side thanks to the e5 pawn, and black to the queen side because that's where the pawn chain is headed. That's why you see black going b5 and a5 in this game. Now let's see who's faster in this opposite side attack. a4, h4, and now a nice move, bishop a6, because this diagonal has a lot of potential. And then just 2 moves later, the pawns have made contact and black already has a decisive advantage. These pawns are going to trade, and when that happens, the a file will open up and black will enjoy immense pressure on the a pawn. White cannot decline the trade with b3 because c3 will hang. So white had to go c4, and after that, black pressured c4, virtually forcing c takes d5, which is a good thing for black. Black wants the queen side to open up. Knight takes d5, and now here you can pause the video if you like and identify black's threat. It's actually a positional threat. Knight to c3. Now it may seem a little odd to voluntarily double and isolate these pawns, but the idea is that d3 is attacked, so is the queen. So bishop takes c3 is forced, and the good side for black is that the position is now open up, specifically the d and the b files. And the threat of rook b8, rook b2, and maybe even knight d4 is surprisingly hard to stop. So instead of knight to g4, white went queen to e4, pinning this knight to the other, so knight c3 is not possible. And now here's another task for you. Black now has a promising position on the queen side. How do you bring more pieces over in a coordinated way? The answer is bishop b5, planning rook a4, queen to a5, and rook to a8, tripling up to win the a2 pawn. Additionally, after rook a4, there's a direct threat of b3. So white played d4 to close the rank, but this allows black to trade the bishops off, then get a pass pawn. And once a2 inevitably falls, they will be connected far advanced pass pawns. And so the rest was a matter of good technique and defense on the king side. And once b2 was in, the game was over. The game ended in checkmate, a win for black in just 10 moves from this position. So that was about the queenside attack against the king's Indian attack, a very feasible plan for French players. It doesn't matter that you're not attacking the king, you can still create open lines to targets, force past pawns through, and keep your opponent so busy on the queen side that you only need simple defenses on the king side. That's all for this video. I wish you all the best in playing the French and delivering successful queenside attacks when the position calls for it, whether in King's Indian attack structures or conventional French defense structures. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.